All right, everyone, this is Central coming back at you with another YouTube video. And I am so close to 1,500 subscribers. I'm getting closer and closer to that mark. I believe I'm about 30 followers away from getting that mark. So please be sure to subscribe, like the video, comment your thoughts, because we got a huge game this weekend. We're going to try to get our seventh win of the season against the Syracuse Orange. It's going to be an 8 o'clock Eastern time kickoff on the ACC Network. God knows we'll see those commercials. And then it's going to be at the Wireless Dome. It used to be called the Carrier Dome, but I'm starting to get used to it more and more about that. Florida State is currently at a 7.5 point favorite so far. The over-under is at about 51. We'll kind of go through some stats as we go through, but I just wanted to kind of reach out to this as soon as I could because this is a game where I predicted Florida State in the preseason to lose. Everybody looked at me and said, okay, Syracuse. Why Syracuse? Well, first off, Florida State had a struggle against them last year. They won 33-30 in their first win of the 2021 season. And this was a situation where you thought Florida State finally got over the hump, but they had to do it in a very comeback fashion, had to get a Ryan Fitzgerald game-winning field goal at the end to kind of secure that victory. Garrett Schrader was running all over them at some points. Sean Tucker was also a weapon that they had as well. Courtney Jackson over there at the wide receiver spot was really good for them. I thought their defense did a really good job in that game, even though they didn't really force many turnovers last year. But they were bringing back 17 offense and defensive starters. So I thought that was going to be a way that Florida State was going to have to kind of get through. And coming off a emotional win against Miami, what I predicted, I thought that this was a situation where Florida State could slip up. So I just wanted to give that in retrospect before we started to begin talking about the Syracuse offense and their defense and how they kind of stack up against Florida State. Well, let's go ahead and start off. This is kind of a game where everybody's kind of in question for this because Garrett Schrader's injury at quarterback is something that everybody is kind of monitoring so far. He's kind of questionable going into the game. He left after the Notre Dame game and in that first half, and then talked about how he didn't play against Pittsburgh, and you saw the loss there. It was only 19-9. Del Rio Wilson used to be the quarterback at Florida there, transferred over to Syracuse, and he's playing that kind of dynamic quarterback there, but he struggled. He had eight passes for 120 yards, and it really wasn't something to be spectacular about. I mean, it wasn't something that you could write home about. Their passing offense in general is only 87th in the country in passing offense, and it's about 219 passing yards a game. So that is something to kind of monitor because Florida State really excels in the passing game with Jordan Travis. They're averaging over 271 passing yards a game. So it kind of really looks in that retrospect kind of area there. But Syracuse, they run a lot of intermediate pass game. They like to really throw the ball in between 10 and 15 yards at most. And they don't really spread you out as much explosive plays-wise. I believe they're last in the country in explosive plays with 48 explosive plays on the year. So that's not something that, you can have to kind of go there because Syracuse doesn't really explode you very much in their offense. But running the ball, I think that's where their kind of strength is so far this season with Sean Tucker. He's got 155 attempts for 777 yards and 7 touchdowns. But the problem is in the last 3 games and they've had these losing streak, they've only had 133 yards in that. So that's something that you really have to kind of monitor there. Florida State runs the ball efficiently, 211 yards a game, 17th in the FBS. And they killed Miami. I mean, that was 30 counter plays out of 49 rushing attempts. They were ridiculously just adding Miami fuel to the fire with that. They were missing tackles left and right. But Syracuse's offense, they really don't have a lot of dynamic receivers. Gadsden is one of those guys that is kind of a flex tight end / wide receiver. He's 6'5", 216 pounds. He's got 40 receptions on the year for about 650 yards, 6 touchdowns. But the problem is they didn't even give him the ball in the last game. He actually got overthrown in the end zone. He kind of left with a stinger. We'll see how he plays in this game. But just in terms of that, I think that is a guy you have to watch out for because the next guy, Courtney Jackson, only has about 200 yards. So you can really see the difference between both of those receivers and kind of their production. On the red zone offense type of deal, they rank 6th in the FBS. They do a really, really good job of getting in the red zone to actually score on most of their opportunities. And that's because their Luke Rosa Award winner from last year with their kicker, I think Andre Smith, is a good guy that is an efficient weapon. I mean, anywhere between 55 and up, is something for him. So I'm kind of hectic about that because I think that gives Syracuse a little bit more points advantage there. But you know how Florida State is in the red zone offense type of deal, and their defense is not really the greatest in stopping red zone. But, you know, we'll have to kind of see what we can do about that and when they get their opportunities, if they even have any at that point. The good news is Florida State's only allowed 13 sacks on the year with their offensive line. But Syracuse, this is where Jared Verse and Fabian Lovett should be able to take advantage. They've allowed 28 sacks on the season, 113th. And here's the crazy stat. In the last 3 games, on this 3-game losing streak, they've allowed 15 sacks and 26 tackles for loss. That is a huge, huge advantage that Florida State can really take advantage of there, because that's something that Florida State can exploit. I mean, you know, chances are Fabian Lovett and Jared Verse, with them being as healthy and this team being as healthy as they are, I think that really helps with everything going on there. But I do kind of see some similarities in Syracuse's defense to Florida State's defense. Their passing defense and passing yards allowed is only 6th in the FBS at 165 passing yards a game. Florida State's is 5th in the FBS with 165. So it's just something to really think about there as you kind of go through. They don't allow a lot of explosive plays. And that's something that Florida State kind of thrives itself on. They're first in the FBS in explosive plays. They're having, I think, 104 explosive plays so far this year. So that's definitely something you have to kind of monitor with everything going on. But as I talked about before, the counter runs were something very, very impressive. But Syracuse runs that 3-3-5 defensive scheme. So they don't miss a lot of tackles. They limit those explosive plays, as I talked about before. And just kind of looking at everything that's going on, you know, the defensive line doesn't really have a whole lot of bulk up front. I mean, you talk about with the inside zone runs and the power runs that they deal with, you're looking at their defensive line. Gear, their defensive end, is 6'6", 233 pounds. Their starting defensive tackle in Garton is 5'11", 266 pounds. And then Chekwu, their other defensive end, is 6'4", 268 pounds. So you're telling me on their starting defensive line at the 3 that they have there, the biggest one is 268 pounds. I mean, I just think that's something Florida State can exploit. I know that Trey Benson is one of those guys that is being able to be a powerful runner. I think he's going to have to do that. I think you're going to have a guy like Trayshawn Ward come back, because I think his patience does a whole lot well. So when the offensive line can kind of scheme around that, being able to overpower some of those guys. But the problem it's going to be is when you run some of those counter runs, you're going to have some of those linebackers that they have, and they're so great at what they do. Michael Jones, the guy, 75 tackles on the season. Marlo Wax is another guy that I think is very disruptive. But just overall, they've allowed 700 total yards in rushing over the last 3 games. I think that's something you have to really, really monitor. But Garrett Williams is a cornerback who I think missed the remaining of the season after tearing his ACL. I think that's something you have to watch out for. Boundary safety Jihad Carter is a guy I would watch out for, because he does have an interception in his last 3 games. So you really have to monitor and think about that as you go along with trying to throw against that safety position. Johnny Wilson should have a good game, but you have to scheme him around a guy like Carter, because he is very explosive and when he gets the hands on the ball. Overall, penalties, Florida State hasn't really done a good job with penalties this season. I think they've had 66 so far. Syracuse have had 74, which is even worse, 122nd in the FBS. So if they're able to kind of get those penalties and get Syracuse off track, I think that could be a really big thing for them. But it's kind of the same thing with Miami and their aggressive defense. I think they want to get you behind the chains. They want to get you there because they don't allow many explosive plays. And I think that's where it takes advantage of. They nickel and dime you until the very end. They get you fed up and you want to try to throw something deep. Next thing you know, it's a Jihad Carter interception. So you really have to be mindful for where you're at on the field with that. But just overall, I think with everything kind of combined in, with injuries and everything, I think Florida State's kind of at the healthiest and freshest they've been so far. I think this is a game they can really take advantage of. I had an eerie feeling about this, and I think Garrett Schrader does play. I just think he's going to be more limited. If he was more healthy, I think this would be a one-score game. But I don't think he's going to be very healthy. I think he's going to be kind of limited. I don't think it's going to be as limited as Tyler Van Dyke as of last week. But he has been practicing this week, so that is something to kind of monitor there. I have Florida State winning 34-17. I know that's a little bit more than what I originally thought preseason. I thought we were going to lose to Syracuse 27-24. And how wicked does the season go whenever you start thinking about these preseason expectations? I do like to look back at those preseason expectations and kind of see where it's going. But I think this is going to be a good spot for Mike Norvell. And and his team that he has so far, I think they're not going to be overlooking this game. They got Louisiana Lafayette after this game, and then you go to the Florida game after that. So you're really trying to lock in for the rest of the season. That way you can get 8 wins and then go to that big rivalry matchup against Florida at home on a Black Friday, where it's going to be showcased in front of the nation at that point. I do think that Florida State is the better team at this point. I think with injuries, I think it really helps out the cause with everything. And I think this is the game where Florida State's going to go in there, take care of business, not really call a whole lot of exotic plays. I think they're going to run the football efficiently. They're going to have over 200 yards rushing. It's been something that Florida State's done all season with rushing yards. So, yeah, I would not be surprised. I think Jordan Travis may be a little bit more involved in the rushing game this time, but I don't think he really necessarily has to. I think you need to get out of this game healthy, being able to continue that run to being 9-3 for the rest of the year. And it's a realistic expectation if you can get past Syracuse. But we'll definitely see how everything pans out. But if you have a score prediction, please drop it in the comments below. I hope you all enjoyed the rest of the video. And as always, go Noles.